Knock, knock. If I had been in the living room, I probably wouldn't have heard it. By chance, I was in the hallway, so I heard a small knock on the entrance. Knock. Behind the thick frosted glass, there was a small figure. What was happening? Who was on the other side of the door? Before my mind could comprehend, my body was already moving. I gently opened the front door, and there was my granddaughter Julie with pale white lips, standing. What's wrong? Are you okay? Her teeth were chattering, and Julie nodded faintly. As I held her, her body was so cold, as if it could freeze me to my core. That would make sense, considering the weather forecast said today would be the coldest day of the winter. There are so many questions I want to ask. But before anything else, I have to save Julie, who is barely breathing. Hurry, boil some water.
Mommy. Grandma, I will tell you.
First, let's warm you up, and then you can tell us. If she knows the way to the apartment, then my daughter Vicky should still be there. We need to rescue her as soon as possible. Julie, do you know where it is? Grandpa is getting the car ready now. She was staring at the yard. Her eyes were overflowing with tears.
It's okay. Mommy's already gone.
She weakly stood up and began to walk towards the door with unsteady steps. What did she mean by gone? Wait, Julie. What's wrong? I was completely lost. Did she sense something?
The flowers fell, so Mommy can't make it anymore.
Her face was filled with despair. One camellia flower in the garden gently fell onto the snow. At that exact moment, our golden retriever, Bob, closed his eyes. He wasn't sick, it was just his time. Our granddaughter Julie burst into tears. For us too, he had been a beloved family member for nearly 10 years, so the grief was immense. Bob was a smart dog and had grown close to Julie during their few years together. Their bond was like that of true siblings. So, we couldn't just tell her not to cry, and it would be cruel to say such things to a 4-year-old child. She cried with swollen eyes and a runny nose for 3 days and nights after that. Since Bob passed away and a whole season has passed, Julie turned 5. My husband, now retired, found himself with plenty of free time and started diving into cooking. Thanks to his efforts, I also got more time off, and we've been enjoying peaceful days. Our daughter Vicky still often visited our home, basically, her childhood home, with Julie. I can feel Julie growing bigger day by day. Whenever the two of them came over, my husband eagerly showcased his cooking skills. He said he loved seeing our granddaughter's delighted face. It completely melted his heart. However, there was one thing that concerned both my husband and me.
Is Tom doing okay?
Yeah, he's fine. Anyway.
She brushed it off with another obvious evasion. Why did my husband bother asking such a thing? Well, it's because our son-in-law never came over to our house, and Vicky always vehemently rejected the topic whenever it came up. Our own peaceful situation made me unable to help but worry about my daughter's family circumstances. I wondered if she might be experiencing some form of harassment. Strangely, once that thought crossed my mind, it was like a floodgate had opened for negative expectations and premonitions. I don't see any bruises or marks, but could there be violence involved? Such thoughts gradually piled up like snow. One evening, While my husband was tidying up the kitchen after using it, he talked to me.
Hey. Next time Vicky and Julie come over, I'll take Julie out to play for a bit. Could you try talking to Vicky while we're out and see if she opens up about anything?
It was my husband who proposed it first. Our granddaughter Julie, who adored her grandfather, would likely be thrilled to go out with him. Vicky might be more willing to open up to me in a one-on-one conversation without her father and daughter. If even then she remained stubbornly silent, then surely there was something hidden. It was a clever plan. All right. I'll leave Julie to you. A few days later.
Julie, want to go out with Grandpa for a bit?
I want to go. Mom, can I go?
Is it okay? Dad?
Yeah. Just take it easy and relax sometimes.
All right then. I'll leave it to you. Julie, just remember not to be too demanding, okay?
Got it.
The first phase of the plan went smoothly, without any hiccups. Though Vicky looked slightly puzzled by the sudden suggestion, she also couldn't find a reason to refuse. Vicky, is there something you want to talk about? I brewed instant coffee for both of us and set them on the table. Cutting to the chase, I asked straightforwardly.
Wait, is that why he took out Julie? Well, I can't say I'm not grateful.
She looked resigned in some way. Perhaps even exhausted. After a moment's pause, her complexion changed drastically, as if she aged a decade in an instant. I couldn't help but gasp. What happened?
I didn't really want to talk about it, but
8 years ago, Vicky married a man named Tom Brown. They met through mutual friends. The first impression of him when he came to introduce himself was good, and their relationship seemed very strong, which was reassuring. Until they had children, both of them worked to support their small family. He rarely visited us because he was busy. That changed after our granddaughter Julie was born. Vicky quit her job to become a full-time mother, and it seems that this was the catalyst for Tom's attitude to worsen day by day. It started with complaints about Vicky quitting her job, but now it has escalated to even more bitter and hurtful remarks. From what I've heard, it's not hard to imagine a tense atmosphere where he might become physically violent. While it's common to hear stories of people changing after marriage, it wasn't until Julie was born that things took a turn in their marriage. However, it's also clear that he hasn't caused any harm to Julie so far, and in that aspect, he's just a regular father.
he won't tell me what's bothering him, so I have no idea. Being in that house just reminds me of that feeling. That's why I've been coming here more often.
I felt crushed by a sense of inadequacy. Why couldn't I see through it? Why does my daughter have to go through such a difficult time? Emotions welled up inside me, tightening my throat. I couldn't even think of what to say. But when I took her hand, I finally managed to speak up. Thank you for telling me. Everything will be okay. We're here for you. When you get home today, pack up quickly and come back to our place. There's no need to force yourself to stay with him.
But I can't prepare money right away.
We have some savings, so don't worry about that for now. The priority is to get away. As I said this, she shed a big tear. Welcome back, Julie. Grandpa didn't get lost?
We were fine.
Does Julie really understand what's going on? We mightn't have noticed until now, but she's resilient and brave, and perhaps she's behaving this way so as not to worry anyone. she might just be pretending to be okay. What a terrible situation. That's exactly why we have to take action now. We can't expose our precious daughter to any more storms. It's unforgivable. After sending our daughters home and explaining the situation to my husband, he nodded in agreement. He was furious, showing signs of wanting to storm over right away, but I managed to calm him down.
I don't know what he's thinking, but he's doing something completely senseless.
However, they still haven't arrived. As hours passed, the anxiety only grew. Our daughter's family also lives in the same city, a bit farther away but still within walking distance. At least, it shouldn't take them 2 hours to walk here. Could they be doing some shopping before coming over? But even then, there's been no contact. Finally reaching my breaking point, I made a call, but no matter how many times I tried, there was no answer.
Wait here. I'll go check. I should have driven them.
My husband left in the car, and 15 minutes later, I got a call from him.
Hey, call the police. There's no one in this house.
Whether he suddenly realized something or had planned it all along, we may never know. Tom Brown disappeared without a trace, taking his wife Vicky and daughter Julie with him.
Sir, I've told you many times. We can't investigate just because they moved out without words. We'll do what we can, so please leave and take care of yourself.
I always thought that police who didn't act in situations like this only existed in fiction. I never imagined they would actually brush it off like this.
Come on, please. Detective, this is clearly a case of disappearance. My daughter and granddaughter have been kidnapped. What more evidence do you need?
Just complaining once won't change anything, sir. And we're not saying we won't do anything. We'll do what we can.
I could sense that it would be pointless to say anything more. And it wasn't like they were completely ignoring us. Let's go home, daring. There are other ways. If the government won't act, then we'll have to take matters into our own hands. While I couldn't help feeling frustrated, I also understood their point of view to some extent. Indeed, the police won't likely take action with just that.
I'll pay. Will you find them?
Yes, that's our duty. We'll gladly help you. Now, could you please tell us the details? I didn't want to believe that the police wouldn't act at all, but I also didn't have much confidence that they would act fully. We turned to a private detective with desperate hope. Luckily, they were very receptive and asked for various pieces of information. I explained in detail the little I had heard from Vicky that day. However, the information I could provide was limited. As the police had said, it was just a single complaint. A month passed with no progress. Winter had set in fully, with snow falling on some days. I wondered if Vicky and Julie were safe. Spending the winter without even knowing that was colder than any winter before. One day, as snow fell steadily from the gloomy clouds, I found myself unable to focus on anything. Doing nothing was unsettling, but so was trying to keep busy. As I absent-mindedly cleaned the house, I felt as if I were being called by something, causing me to pause for a moment. Knock, knock. I probably wouldn't have heard it if I had been in the living room. But I happened to be cleaning the hallway, so I heard the faint knock on the door. Knock. On the other side of the thick frosted glass, there was a small figure. What was happening? Who was there behind the door? Before my mind could fully comprehend, my body moved. Careful not to push over the small figure, I gently opened the door. There was Julie with lips pale as snow. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" She nodded weakly with chattering teeth.
I need kerosene.
As I held her to warm her up, her body was so cold that it felt like it chilled to the core. And it was no wonder. The weather forecast had said that today would be the coldest day of the winter. "Honey, bring towels and blankets." There were so many questions I wanted to ask. But before anything else, I had to save the breathless Julie. And then, boil some water.
Yes.
Mommy is. Grandma, I'll tell you.
First, let's get you warmed up before you say anything. I brought her close to the stove and wrapped her in a blanket. Looking out from the living room, I noticed that snow had begun to pile up in the garden. Feeling a bit warmer now?
Yeah. But Mommy.
Can you talk now? Can you tell us what happened? She began to speak in fragments. According to her, on that day a month ago, when they returned home, Tom was already there. Later, they were forcibly taken to another apartment, not their own, and were kept there. The location was somewhere in the city, and she remembered the route from that place to our home thanks to her walks with Bob and managed to find her way back here. How smart and brave she is. But this is no time for admiration. If she knows the way to that apartment, Vicky should still be there. We need to go for the rescue as soon as possible. Julie, do you know where that place is? Grandpa is getting the car ready now. She was staring at the garden. Tears welled up in her eyes.
It's okay. Mom's already gone.
She weakly stood up and started walking towards the entrance with unsteady steps. What does she mean by gone? Wait, Julie. What's wrong? Surprised, I quickly stood up and hugged her tightly. But I was completely confused. What could she possibly have sensed?
Because the flower fell, Mommy is no good anymore.
Her face was filled with despair. I managed to get Julie, who was sobbing, into the car, and reluctantly asked her for directions. Currently, Julie is the only person who knows where Vicky is. Despite feeling frustrated, we drove slowly for over 30 minutes to get directions from her. She walked this distance alone, so her fear is unimaginable.
Here.
Julie pointed with swollen eyes. There was a terribly dilapidated rundown apartment.
Wait here. I'll go check it out.
My husband jumped out of the car, holding a deck brush for self-defense just in case. We were left alone in the car, and all I could do was comfort and calm Julie. Within just 5 minutes, there was a loud bang. I glanced at the apartment door, and it seemed my husband slammed the door and he was holding Vicky, who looked lifeless, in his arms. I quickly opened the rear door.
Mom.
Vicky.
It's okay, Julie. She still has a pulse, but she's unconscious. I've called an ambulance. Right now, we need to warm her up.
The car's heater was turned up to an excessive level. Vicky, while not as cold as Julie had been earlier, was still thoroughly chilled. Though she seemed to be gradually recovering, the worry remained. 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, and I felt a slight sense of relief. While my husband explained the situation to one of the paramedics, the others lifted Vicky into the ambulance. Then, I suddenly realized something. Julie had been in the same place all this time, hadn't she? Please, can you check this child too? She's been in the same place until just now. Since I couldn't drive, I got into the ambulance as a companion for both of them. My husband followed the ambulance in our car. The next day, things took a significant turn. With actual harm done, the police finally sprang into action. At this point, Tom Brown became a serious suspect pursued by the police for the abduction and confinement. Initially, there was anger at their lack of action. Then it turned to disbelief, but seeing them finally act at this stage reignited the anger. Anyway, if they act, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes to light. Although Vicky is still unconscious, her condition seems to be stable. Julie is also hospitalized due to malnutrition, but she is now on the path to recovery. However, the psychological damage inflicted on her young heart is immeasurable. I tried contacting Tom Brown again, but I still haven't heard from him. Which, of course, is to be expected. According to my husband, the room was empty, with several cardboard boxes, a coffee table, an old-fashioned kerosene heater, one dirty bed, and a few other items. It was hardly enough for anyone to live comfortably. Despite that, our daughter and granddaughter spent an entire month there. Suddenly, he took his wife and child away, disappearing without a trace, leaving no sign of himself behind. The police said there were only traces of 2 people living in that apartment. Moreover, it seems they were living in extremely poor conditions, especially in terms of food. This means that Tom had intended to confine the 2 from the beginning, for some reason, leaving them there while he observed from somewhere else. Whatever his true intentions were, it's despicable beyond words. 2 days after Vicky was found, she somehow regained consciousness. Although she still finds it difficult to move on her own, she has recovered enough to sit up and talk. Finally, there is a glimmer of hope to uncover the full story behind the incident. What happened that day? Can you tell me? She remained silent at first, but after a moment, she began to speak hesitantly.
When we got home, that man was waiting for us. He took away my phone and wallet. Then we were forced into a car and taken to that apartment.
After cutting off contact with the outside world, he pressured her to work. She said the way he spoke to her at that time was so intimidating, it's almost suffocating to remember. But there wasn't much she could do there, just an on-the-side job, and he took away almost all of her meager income. Why didn't you escape? You could have left whenever you wanted. In fact, it's still unclear how Julie managed to run away and make it back home. There was absolutely no security in that place.
Of course I thought about it. But he made it clear that it would be pointless to run, and if I did, he wouldn't forgive me. So, I couldn't move, thinking about what might happen to Julie if I did something.
While there might not have been direct violence, depriving someone of their freedom and resorting to threats makes his actions unequivocally despicable. Do you have any idea why? Honestly, it felt uncomfortable. It sounded like I was implying there might have been some reason on Vicky's part. But I didn't know how else to ask. There were so many things I didn't understand.
His attitude changed around the time I quit my job to focus on childcare. So, considering that, it seems like he really wanted me to work, no matter what.
It's okay. You've done nothing wrong. It seemed difficult to pinpoint the cause. So, I needed to find out his true intentions through other means. Do you know where he might be? The police are searching for him, but they haven't found any leads so far.
It's embarrassing, but we don't have enough savings for him to afford hotels or places like that. If he's not at home, he might be crashing at a friend's place or something.
My intuition told me this is important. Okay, I'll let the police and the detective know later. Also, the day before yesterday, Julie said you had passed away. It wasn't anything serious, thankfully.
Why would Julie say something like that? Maybe she caught a bad cold. She's been coughing non-stop for a week. When you're not eating properly, even simple illnesses can linger,
Vicky said, with a hint of exasperation and a slight smile. Julie, how are you feeling? Can you tell Grandma a little bit about what happened?
Sure.
How did you leave that room?
Daddy wasn't there. If he's not there, I can leave.
She truly is a brave granddaughter. It's heart-wrenching, but more than that, it's something to be proud of. And there's one more thing I want to ask. This isn't directly related to the case, but it's something that personally caught my attention. Why did you say Mom was gone the day before yesterday?
Because a red flower fell. Bob disappeared because of that.
It seems she believed that when a camellia flower fell, someone would pass away. Indeed, given that camellia flowers fall intact from the stem, it's understandable for a child to think that way. Bob passed away towards the end of winter. That's the season when camellias fall. I see. So that's what it was. But that's not what those flowers mean. It's okay. Mommy is alive, right? Julie nodded slightly, tears streaming down her face once again. I hugged my granddaughter without asking for any reasons.
Thank you, Grandpa, Grandma, for saving Mommy.
No, it's thanks to you, Julie. Grandma appreciates you. 3 days after Vicky and Julie were rescued, news came in that Tom Brown had been arrested. I placed my hand over my chest and let out a sigh with relief. It turned out that Tom had been hiding, just as Vicky had said, at his friend's house. However, it wasn't just any friend. Apparently, that friend was a woman, revealing an unsettling truth about their relationship. More importantly, Julie's health has completely improved, and she has returned to her lively self as before. Vicky has also recovered smoothly without any serious injuries. When we told her about Tom's arrest, Vicky's face seemed to regain some of its brightness. There's no longer a need to confront fear. Although a restraining order has been issued by the court, it's not enough to provide complete peace of mind. That's why my husband, Vicky, Julie, and I have moved to the outskirts away from the city center. It's almost been half a year now. And there was another significant change. We decided to adopt a new golden retriever with a red coat. Julie named him Bobby. It seems she couldn't forget about Bob. In the lush greenery, the siblings, one human and one canine, happily romped around the now much larger backyard. Fortunately, Bobby's personality closely resembles that of Bob, our previous pet, and he quickly bonded with Julie. It's such a heartwarming sight that it almost makes you want to sign in contentment.
I'm home.
We're back.
Just before dusk, my husband and Vicky returned from court. As I watched the siblings playing in the yard, I finally had the chance to hear the details from them. Tom faced charges primarily related to abduction, confinement, coercion, and abandonment of a dependent, resulting in a confirmed sentence of 7 years in prison. Honestly, considering the atrocities he committed, I couldn't help but feel it wasn't enough. I even wished he'd never come out again. The reason for forcing Vicky into work was simply because he wanted an easy life. To terrorize his own family for such a reason shows a complete lack of morality and ethics. We were also angry at ourselves for not seeing through it. As for the woman who harbored Tom, the focus seems to be on whether she was aware of his fugitive status. But honestly, I couldn't care less. Anyway, we've now moved to a peaceful place surrounded by nature, where the 4 of us and our furry one are starting a new life together. The wounds we've suffered won't heal easily, but Julie is playing around with Bobby both indoors and outdoors, and Vicky is gradually returning to her cheerful self. Not everything is smooth sailing, but we've come to really enjoy this life. During the move, we brought the camellia tree from our old house to our new one. It was quite a hassle, but we couldn't leave behind this tree because it was a memorial tree for our daughter. Although it's currently in the midst of summer and not showing any signs of blooming, come winter, it will surely bloom beautifully. And even when the seasons change and its flowers eventually fall, I believe Julie won't shed any more tears.
You're ugly, incompetent, and a spendthrift. Get married quickly because you're a nuisance.
That's what my father said to me when I turned 16, spewing insults. Unable to rebel, I married a man I didn't even know. A lifeless, emotionless married life ensued. Despair engulfed me. But life is unpredictable. Little did I know, a major turnaround was waiting ahead. My name is Nancy, 35 years old. I bought Valentine's chocolates for myself, and when my husband asked,
"What about mine?"
I apologized. I intended to buy his until I got to the store, but I got so caught up in buying for myself that I forgot. I'll send my husband some nice wine next time. Yeah, let's do that. Nowadays, I live peacefully in a loving home, but I used to hate being at home when I was young. Until my sister Amy was old enough, it wasn't like that. Amy, 2 years younger than me, already had distinct facial features from infancy, and everyone expected her to become beautiful in the future. A few years later, surpassing everyone's expectations, my sister grew up to be adorable and became a kids model at my mother's urging. It wasn't major acting gigs, just appearing briefly in local construction-related commercials or showing her profile on flyers for community events. She wasn't the real deal as everyone imagined for a child actor. Yet, for my parents, even my sister's small achievements were a significant honor. They adored her like a cherished accessory, while, predictably, their interest in me dwindled rapidly. It's because I inherited from my father's side grandmother, a sturdy type. Unlike my sister, who was born with slender features typical of modern children, I was the complete opposite. Not only did I inherit a robust frame, but I also had a plump figure, unlike the rest of my slim family members. Despite eating the same meals and hardly ever snacking to avoid standing out from the family, I couldn't understand why I was the only chubby one. How many times did I envy my sister's slim physique? However, even as a child, I understood that comparing myself to others was futile. I am who I am. I tried to focus on my strengths. Yet, my parents denied my existence.
Well, you were the first child, like a prototype. The craftsmanship was terrible.
At some point, my drunken parents, while having drinks in the living room, spoke ill of me. I overheard these words, and needless to say, they cast a shadow of doubt on whether I was just a failed prototype for a long time. My beautiful mother was a confident woman when it came to her appearance, always meticulous no matter her age. While it's fine to take pride in oneself, she was also harsh on others. She would disdainfully recount incidents like when a neighbor, a mother of quintuplets, came out early in the morning in plain clothes to take out the trash. Apparently, her husband, a high earner, was hardly ever home, leaving her to manage everything alone. Instead, a woman who seemed to be her mother-in-law would often visit, sometimes with raised voices heard from their house. Looking back, she must have been going through a tough time herself. Even from a child's perspective, she always seemed to be struggling. Amidst single-handedly raising children and facing numerous challenges, what's wrong with being in plain clothes? If anything, she deserved praise for managing household chores admirably amidst all that. I used to think my mother couldn't empathize with others' backgrounds, being cold-hearted. It was sad that she couldn't find me, with my imperfect appearance, adorable, but it was just the natural course of things. As I entered elementary school and reached the age where I should have been receiving pocket money, my sister got $10 while I got nothing. The visible disparities between us became more pronounced. For instance, when we had meals, my sister would get plenty of meat in her dish while mine would be loaded with vegetables she disliked. Coincidentally, the ones I disliked too. Despite my mother's actions, my father remained silent, and even though my sister probably had a faint sense that something was amiss in our household, she seemed to revel in my precarious position. There was no ally for me within the family. Moreover, while my sister went unpunished for breaking things, I would be severely scolded. My mother often used the phrase,
"You're the older sister, aren't you?"
as if it was a strong card, frequently casting me as the villain. It was common for younger siblings to receive hand-me-down clothes, but in our case, if my sister didn't want them or if they didn't fit her anymore, they became mine. Consequently, I always wore tight-fitting clothes, with sleeves and hems consistently too short. Wearing tight clothes when I was already thick-set and chubby was the worst. It made me look even chunkier, and naturally, I became the butt of jokes among my classmates. Even though it was my mother who made me wear ill-fitting clothes, she too would smirk at me with contempt. Whether at home or outside, I was constantly told,
"Your sister is so cute, isn't she?"
Hearing this repeatedly, my once bright personality gradually darkened. Even when interacting with friends, I would entertain paranoid thoughts like, maybe this person also finds me ugly. Or, perhaps deep down, they want to be friends with my sister instead. Looking back now, I realize how absurd it was to entertain such delusions, but at the time, I was trapped in a cycle of self-victimization. With a thoroughly negative mindset, my relationships with others inevitably suffered, and my circle of friends dwindled gradually. Yet, rather than feeling down about it, I preferred to isolate myself willingly. I was tired of engaging with others while constantly doubting their feelings, finding solace in solitude instead. As I endured those dark times in elementary and middle school, a certain incident occurred just before I was about to enter high school. It turned out that my parents hadn't paid my high school enrollment fee. Originally, they had no intention of sending me to high school. They'd rather spend money on my sister's dance and acting lessons if it came to using funds for my high school education. I somehow managed to persuade them, finally getting them to promise that if I passed the entrance exam for a public high school, they would let me attend. At the time, with my sister's increasing involvement in entertainment activities, and being burdened with household chores by my parents, I studied desperately amidst the chaos and managed to pass the exam as they instructed, securing a spot at a public high school. I thought everything would be fine now, and although I was just a child, I foolishly trusted my parents and felt relieved. But I was wrong. Those people weren't my parents. They were just monsters who brought me into this world. My mother casually remarked.
Enrollment fee? Oh, I forgot about that. But it doesn't matter. You don't need to go to high school anyway. With or without education, with that face of yours, your life won't amount to anything worthwhile.
Without any apology, my father and sister laughed uproariously as my mother spewed her insults. It was too late for me to realize that the enrollment fee hadn't been paid, and I had to give up on entering high school. Sure, I could have worked part-time to save up money and enrolled a year later, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like I had a sort of burnout syndrome. The path I had desperately grasped by obediently following my parents' orders was suddenly blocked, and I found myself feeling indifferent, like I didn't care anymore. I couldn't help but have dark thoughts that even with a normal education, I wouldn't be loved by anyone. It's separate from all this, though. I wonder why adolescence tends to turn so negative. My father sarcastically remarked.
Wasn't it better not to go to school? Now you can do plenty of household chores.
Despite his snide comment, I had become so despondent that I didn't mind living such a life. I couldn't muster up the motivation to go to work, nor did I have the energy to leave home. Looking back, I realized I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was living each day like a robot, just fulfilling the tasks my parents demanded of me. One day, my father suddenly said to me,
"You're turning 16 tomorrow, right?"
Despite recently ignoring me, his mention of my birthday brought a smile to my face. I couldn't help but wonder if he would celebrate it this year, perhaps because I've been helping with chores. However, his next words shattered that hope as he casually demanded,
"Hurry up and get married. A useless, ugly, money-sucking daughter like you is just a nuisance."
What? My father casually demanded that I get married, as if telling me to run to the supermarket for casual shopping, leaving me dumbfounded. Without even looking at me, he insisted,
"Get married tomorrow right away."
Spouting unreasonable demands. Wait, what do you mean, Dad? I stammered, unable to find words. He explained,
"There's someone I want to be on good terms with for Amy's career. Seems like the son of someone connected to a talent agency is of marriageable age."
I protested. But why marriage? He chuckled.
"Oh, at a dinner, when I talked that our eldest daughter seemed to take a liking to the son's photo, and I hyped it up, the talk turned to about marriage. Ha ha ha."
I felt an unprecedented sense of disgust towards my father, who was in such high spirits. I had never seen a photo of such a man before, and my father talking with a smile about selling off his daughter made me sick. In this day and age, it's inconceivable to accept marrying someone I've never even seen. Despite thinking everything was impossible, my father said,
"The son on the other side seems to have taken a liking to your photo too. It's a miracle that someone with your looks has been liked. Congratulations."
Finally, my father looked into my eyes with a beaming smile, and I was speechless. Liked by him? That's just impossible. After all, I've always been told by everyone that I'm unattractive. For someone to like that. It felt disrespectful, but I couldn't help but think the son must be a pretty awful person. Maybe the son's desperate for any connection with a woman, or maybe he's trying to make me do something even more unsavory. I couldn't help but feel like there must be some ulterior motive. I wanted to refuse, but my father threatened.
If you dare to be selfish, I'll kick you out.
So, I had no choice but to remain silent. And thus, I was forced to sign the marriage certificate against my will. My sister watched with gleeful claps and laughter. It was a moment when I cursed my own weakness and being born into this family from the bottom of my heart. And so, I was married to some man. I couldn't even tell if he was important or not. I was forcefully taken to a new home supposedly prepared by this man's parents, whom I had never met. There, I met Jason, my husband, for the first time. 10 years my senior, he was a rather plain man, not exactly gloomy, but lacking in vigor. I couldn't judge, being no great beauty myself, but he wasn't someone I could imagine falling in love with. Apparently, he also had a strained relationship with his parents, and his parents seemed pleased that he was leaving home with this marriage. Like attracts like. Thinking so made me feel empty, realizing that two rejects were being burdened upon each other through marriage. After an unwanted marriage, life with my husband began. However, for the first month, there was no conversation beyond morning and bedtime greetings. We even ate separately, and I tried to avoid facing him as much as possible. Then one day, my husband said,
I know you don't feel favorably towards me. You were probably tricked into this marriage by your parents, right?
I was taken aback, unsure if I should honestly admit it. But my husband seemed to understand everything from my demeanor and simply smiled, saying,
You don't have to answer.
Then he confessed.
But I really liked your photo.
I retorted. That's impossible. My sister is prettier. He replied.
I was drawn to you the moment I saw you. Being married to you only reinforced that feeling. Perhaps because our circumstances are similar. I was attracted to who you are inside.
His words left me speechless, torn between disbelief and the sincerity in his eyes. As someone who had never even experienced first love, I couldn't comprehend this way of falling in love. My husband continued.
If you don't want this, you're free to divorce me. I have the paperwork ready. But would you consider starting as friends, if you're willing?
His shy smile made my heart flutter ever so slightly, a secret I still hold. At that moment, his willingness to be friends instead of just husband and wife touched me, making me reconsider this relationship. From then on, we started eating together. There wasn't any particular agreement, and even after learning about my husband's kindness, I didn't immediately muster the courage to become close. Of course, it took time to come together. But gradually, we began having conversations beyond greetings, discussing the weather, temperature, and sharing our preferences. Being together didn't seem so unpleasant anymore. As the invisible wall between us thinned, we found ourselves in a relationship where we shared meals and watched TV together. Interestingly, we both loved books and had many things in common. Like my husband initially mentioned, both of us had been considered troublesome by our parents, so our values and perspectives were similar, and being with each other felt more comfortable than anyone else's company. As we lived together, years passed, and in our 4th year, he proposed. Finally, we became truly husband and wife from the heart. Some might find it odd to receive a proposal after already being married on paper, but for us, it was fine. After all, we were a quirky couple from the start. We skipped dating and proposals, but together, we carefully rebuilt what we missed. After 10 years, our parents never came to check on us, and amidst peaceful days, a child was born. Living happily, I thought my life wasn't a waste, until news broke of a famous celebrity being arrested by the police. It seemed another celebrity associated with them might also be involved in the crime, as the TV buzzed daily with gossip magazine articles. Although it was a world unrelated to us, my sister's name unexpectedly emerged among those mentioned. Despite holding the title of an actress, she currently had no work and hardly engaged in any entertainment activities, occasionally taking on extra-like jobs through her agency. While her fame as an actress was virtually non-existent, her notoriety as a criminal was suddenly skyrocketing. In a photo, she was seen closely following a famous actress from her agency into a crowded venue, where many men were present. Though she managed to avoid prosecution for the criminal activity, it was obvious to everyone that she was involved. The person who leaked this photo was a former classmate of my sister's who worked at a nightclub. Apparently, they had always disliked my sister, and upon seeing her by chance at the club, discreetly took a photo, shared it with friends, and it quickly spread, eventually reaching the magazines, sparking this scandal. As my sister, I can only sigh in resignation. Well, I thought it had nothing to do with me. Until suddenly, my parents showed up at our doorstep. As soon as they opened the door, my mother, with tears in her eyes, clung to me, pleading,
Help us, Nancy.
My father desperately supported her. My mother, who used to be so beautiful, looked gaunt, with damaged hair, more gray strands, and thinning locks. What are you here for? I don't remember being asked to help, I said, puzzled.
You're the only one we can rely on now.
My mother replied. Huh? I showed my confusion, prompting my father to speak up.
Let me explain.
He began. It turned out my sister had been arrested just recently. She was just a no-name actress, so it hadn't made the news, and I hadn't heard about it either. Apparently, my sister's classmates had managed to gather information even I, her sister, didn't know. With rumors swirling beyond what was reported in the news, my sister's misdeeds were now common knowledge among the neighbors. Consequently, my parents were being shunned, and their home was being vandalized with graffiti, rocks thrown, and silent calls.
We can't live there anymore. Why did she do such a thing? She shouldn't have been born. You're my only daughter.
My mother cried, embracing me.
Please. We can't stay in that house anymore. Let us stay here. Let's live happily together.
She pleaded. What audacity! I quietly took my mother's shoulders and gently pushed her away.
Nancy?
I don't remember ever living happily with you, I said calmly. What are you saying? We were a close-knit family, weren't we? My mother insisted.
That's right, Nancy.
My father added. Both of them looked puzzled by my words, clearly trying not to upset me. If we were such a close-knit family, I wouldn't have ended up in this marriage. You both sold me out for my sister. I snapped at my father.
But being here in this house means you're still carrying on with your marriage. Isn't that a happy outcome?
My father chuckled. Enraged by his laughter, I impulsively pushed him away. Don't joke about this. There's nothing happy about it. It just happened that my husband turned out to be a decent person, but if he had been a villain, I would have been in hell. What do you think people's lives are worth? A family built on the sacrifices of others deserves to fall apart. I shouted, my voice breaking as tears welled up. My husband, who had silently stood by, gently took my hand.
Forgiveness is also important, Nancy.
My father said, attempting to pacify me with a patronizing tone and a cheap smile, which only fueled my anger. I threw out a word that I had kept silent about for so long. Well then, why don't you both live together with your respective lovers? Isn't forgiveness important? If you can forgive each other's mistakes? Both of them froze at my words. As they paled, they exchanged glances.
What?
My mother stammered. Did you think I hadn't noticed? Both of you were having affairs, right? You didn't realize you were betraying each other? That's right. My parents each had a lover on the side. They probably thought no one knew, but my sister and I likely did. It wasn't just the parent-child relationship that was crumbling. Their marriage was falling apart too. This house. Where's the happiness in this family?
Were you betraying me?
My mother yelled.
You were the one.
My father retorted angrily. I watched their spectacle of a shouting match with cold eyes. When I suggested, "Isn't forgiveness important? Instead of fighting, why don't you forgive each other?" They fell silent, unable to respond. I don't want to be dragged into your charade anymore. From now on, leave me out of it. Completely. I don't care if it's ostracism or whatever, but I hope you both rot in hell. I have no intention of being bound by you anymore. I unleashed years of pent-up anger on the two of them, to the point of using foul language. Perhaps realizing the unbelievable nature of their relationship, they desperately pleaded with me to forgive them. How ugly. Naturally, I rejected their pleas, declaring, "If you dare to involve me further, I'll walk out of here." Well, it was easier said than done. I didn't really have a place to go, despite making such a bold statement. The police wouldn't be of much help either. Well, sometimes you just have to show some backbone. Whether my words had any effect or not, they seemed to understand there was no refuge to be found, as they hung their heads and kneeled on the pavement.
Let's go.
My husband said, urging me back into the house. I obediently followed my husband's lead back inside. After a while, I heard them sobbing outside, calling my name, but I didn't open the door. About a month after that incident, I received word that my childhood home had burned down in a suspicious fire. I don't know if it's related to my sister's situation, and the culprit hasn't been caught, but with graffiti all over the place and the house in shambles, it's clear it was vandalized. Despite their affair being exposed, my parents chose not to divorce. However, my mother suffered burns on her proud face, not severe but leaving a scar resembling a keloid. Whether it was because of this or for another reason, one day, my father left without any word. He abandoned my mother. Mother convinced herself it was because her face was no longer beautiful, so she rarely ventured outside, despite once enjoying it. They were always cheating on each other, so I suspect it wasn't about looks but perhaps just exhaustion from being together. But only God knows the truth. Still, I'm sure I know more about my father than my mother, who apparently didn't even notice his infidelity. It turns out my father had borrowed money from loan sharks to promote my sister, lost his job, and is now drowning in debt. After serving a year and a half in prison, my sister started appearing in questionable videos, possibly due to financial difficulties. I've heard rumors of her mental instability, but it's no longer my concern. It's true what they say about karma, and while I contemplate that, I'll watch from afar as they face their consequences. On the other hand, I'm currently blessed with 4 children and lead busy days. When the younger ones were born, they were twins, so it was really tough. After all, I only finished middle school, and my husband graduated from high school, So I worried, could we afford to raise 4 kids? But we both worked hard, got qualifications, and now I work in medical administration while my husband is in a managerial position at a cutting-edge call center that values meritocracy over educational background or nationality. Yes, studying while raising kids, especially during pregnancy, was hard back then. Even though my husband was busy with job hunting, he supported me a lot, and I'm grateful for that. He's supportive with childcare and household chores too. While our marriage started out strangely, I'm proud to be with him. In that sense, maybe I should thank those two. My husband is not only fond of our children but still treats me like a lover. It's a bit embarrassing, but even at this age, we occasionally go on dates. Whether it's to the movies or a cafe, it feels like we're dating as students, but it's precious time for us who got married without experiencing such things. I hope we can continue to cherish each other and our family. May tomorrow be another happy day. That's why I live each day appreciating the precious moments.